Hello, and welcome to Post Games, a podcast about why and how we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant, and I am so happy to have you here as the leaves change color, the pumpkin gets spiced, and Americans make that brave, bold, and faithful decision to switch from cold brew coffee to hot coffee. It is officially scary season. Oh, have I caught you by surprise? Did you think that Halloween passing meant that spooky season came to an end? Well, my friends, you see, Halloween is more like the beginning of a new year of horror. And even the most traditional calendar backs this up. Beginning on the 1st of November, we have Dia de los Muertos, followed by Guy Fawkes Night. At Thanksgiving, we gather with loved ones to slowly torment and brutalize the corpse of a big, dead bird, patiently caramelizing its flesh, and then posing with aunts and uncles for pictures before using our teeth to rip flesh from muscle and muscle from bone. By early December, the sun, it is setting before 5 p.m., and the freshly installed Christmas lights serve double duty as displays of festive merriment and also as protection from the darkness that can smother the suburbs in the late hours of the night when all the porch lights go out. Even Christmas itself has the ghost stories of M.R. James, teens wearing Hot Topic's latest batch of Nightmare Before Christmas attire, and the threat of a visit from Krampus. So, sure, spooky season is over. But listener, the scary season has just begun, particularly here at Post Games. To prepare you, I have brought one of my favorite critics, Ashley Bardhan. She's actually been writing a long time about everything from music to video games, but it's her games criticism, specifically her horror criticism, that has really established itself in gaming culture. Ashley will explain the appeal of playing horror games and how they might make your life less scary. So if you've been avoiding them for a long time, this is your chance to reconsider. This week on Post Games, why people play games that terrify them. Act 1, the case for playing horror games. Act 2, horror as therapy. A Patreon bonus, Ashley shares 5 horror games that you will want to play this holiday season. And of course, Act 3, the news of the week. Listener, beware, you are in for a scare. I mean, not really, unless you count this one. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. Oh, what do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup. Just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Act 1. The case for playing horror games. Today's guest is critic, reporter, and writer Ashley Bardhan, whose work has appeared on Vulture, Pitchfork, and The Observer. By day, she writes for the games media publication Games Radar Plus, where she has helped to pioneer a sprawling headline format that I can only describe in D&D terms as chaotic good. An example? One Japanese school is using Hideo Kojima's unfinished Silent Hill game PT to teach students English, and it sounds like a great way to memorize the words, murder his entire family. Outside the day job, our guest pins the blog Plant or Beast, where she uses a variety of forms, reporting, criticism, poetry, visual collage to explore her lifelong connection with horror. Her most recent piece, Lovers Meeting, draws lines between the Silent Hill series and growing up in a literal haunted house. Trust me when I say this is one of the most fascinating and surprising conversations that I've had on Post Games, and though it starts in the relatively traditional space of what is horror and why do we enjoy it, it goes in directions you could never predict. Don't be afraid, listeners. You will be glad that you stayed till the end. So, pour yourself a bowl of stale leftover candy corn, sit in that uncomfortable wooden, creaky rocking chair, and join us mid-conversation about the early days of video game horror. Why do you think it is so easy to scare people?
I mean, the animal part of your brain, your amygdala, your fight or flight, this is how you work. If something is a threat, if something is unknown, if something is not quite right. I feel like I talk about horror and romance as kind of two sides of the same coin because they both trigger the same part of your brain. They're both arousing the same kind of instinct in you. The same way you can identify porn is the same way you can identify the monster under your bed. It's just an instinct. That's why we have so much romance and so much horror, because it's like you throw a bunch of shit at the wall and something's either going to scare you or make you horny or both.
Video games have this long history of cribbing from film and television. Particularly, I'd say, as they're finding their sea legs, they're very subconscious as a medium. What do you see influencing horror games in these early years, I guess, as it's transitioning into PS1, PS2, and it is finding itself?
That's interesting. I think early horror references itself more often than it references films. Or maybe that's not true. Thematically, there's film references. I mean, like Silent Hill and Jacob's Ladder. There are so many things in Silent Hill 2 that are straight out of Jacob's Ladder. So many set pieces and ideas are just kind of frame for frame as best they can, like transported into the game. But the way that they function in a game is just so different to how it unfolds in a movie. I think about this a lot because I love horror movies, but the people I know who are into horror games versus horror movies are like very different people. And I always wonder why that is.
Do you have a guess at why that is?
There's two different kinds of nerds, and it doesn't always intersect. And horror movies, there's just so much of it. So like everyone who's into Terrifier, The Conjuring, they're like Zoomer TikTok people being like, do you want to watch the scariest movie of the year? And they're all like 18 and like love murder and stuff. And then you have where I consider myself of like Criterion subscriber, where you're in the late 20s to mid 40s range, maybe even like 50s range. And you're going to Regal Cinemas. You live in Brooklyn. You like shitty B movies, but in intellectual way. That's like where I consider myself. And then there's the real heads, which are silent movies, and people are going to talk to you about Christopher Lee. And I'm in that camp too. But there's just so much of it. And in games, I mean, this is the problem with games, is that the stereotypical gamer is always a 30 plus male, white male, approximately. And that has been true for generations, no matter how much older or younger the average age of gamer is, just because that's kind of where it's primarily been marketed for so long. Movies don't have that, which is great for movies, but not so good for games.
I'm going to put a little pin here because I want to come back to this idea and how it's changing. But first, most video games are power fantasies. And then most horror films are about this loss of power, right? How do horror games balance that? How can you make a game that is distinctly not about power?
That's why I like horror games, is that I feel like they try so hard to disempower you, right? Like you have Ethan Winters and you have James Sunderland and you have all these like flaccid guys who are running around with their flashlight and like getting bonked on the head. Survival horror, right? Like that's the answer, giving you as little opportunity to acquire resources as possible, making you doubt your own ability, not as you yourself, but the person you're becoming in this game.
When I was a teenager, a horror game meant you were playing alone in a dark room. It was the original Resident Evil. But that changes substantially with the popularity of streaming. And I'm curious if you could tell folks about how horror helps to popularize streaming, and then also the opposite, how streaming influenced horror games.
I'll talk about that more later, but that's how I personally started getting interested in horror games. Because I'm 27, so I was, I don't know, 12 or 13 when I started watching like PewDiePie, Markiplier, Fighting Cowboy, like all those like OG YouTubers. The New York Times columnists, when you tell them gamer, they're like 8-year-old Roblox child, right? So I feel like maybe in that way, streaming has influenced horror games, because I think a lot of kids play horror games because of streamers. Like I learned about Slenderman through PewDiePie or whatever. I experienced Outlast, which is still one of my favorite games ever, through Let's Plays. I think streamers make horror games less scary for younger kids, which is a leg in. Like that's the way to get in, if you have an adult kind of holding your hand and being like, let's make fun of this. So that makes me hopeful for the future of horror games. And I think that's also why we're seeing a return to kind of shitty low poly games, because when you're streaming something, it doesn't matter how it looks, doesn't matter how discernible it is. If you have someone with you either reacting, screaming, telling you whatever this is should scare me. I feel like when I was a kid, it was more about music, but hearing older people talk about things that I didn't grow up with made me so desperate to grow up with those things. And I think we're kind of having that now. Like I'm really attracted to PS2 style graphics, and I play PS2 games. I did not grow up with a PS2, but just because of how people talk about it and the people that I looked up to when I was a kid make those things kind of eternally nostalgic.
Now, for a bunch of people who listen to this show, I imagine they are on the slightly older scale, and they might be less familiar with the shift towards multiplayer in horror games. Can you tell people like how that has evolved over the last 10 years? Because it's strange how popular it's become.
That is probably the most easily mapped to streamers, right? Like the fact that multiplayer horror games, like maybe 2010, like Xbox PS3 era, like how many multiplayer horror games are there? Like none, right?
Yeah. Left 4 Dead would maybe be the very first-ish, and that's a weird shooter thing.
Right. I hate multiplayer horror games, but just so we all know. But this is kind of what I mean, that it's like you have someone taking the sting out of it. When you have 3 people in lethal company being like, he, look where we are, it's not as scary. I think same thing with sex and horror. I think people make jokes about it because they're uncomfortable. And it makes it more palatable for a general audience, right? So multiplayer games, in a way, are expanding horror through streamers because you feel like you're not alone when you're watching a streamer play a multiplayer with a bunch of people. So then you want to be part of that too because it looks fun and awesome. And my friend Markiplier is doing it. And that's helping the horror genre.
The other side of it, it sounded to me like when you said, oh, it makes people less uncomfortable. That when you said that, you want the uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is not a negative term for you. So what do you mean by that? What is it that's missing?
Multiplayer horror games, I'm just going to word association that I have with multiplayer horror. Youthful, more comedic, cartoonish. And these are all things that I think streamers capitalize on. Like, they are marketing to kids. Their style of humor and commentary is cartoonish because it's broad strokes. There's no nuance. It's just kind of big reactions, big laughs, like physical comedy and stuff. Yes, Lethal Company, Repo, those are horror games in name. I don't consider them horror.
What makes something horror for you?
If it's disturbing, if I'm disturbed, if it's scary, it's not scary. If you're older than 8 years old and you're getting scared of, like, no offense to anyone out there, if you're getting scared of Lethal Company clones, I need you to think about some things. I need you to take a look in the mirror. Say Bloody Mary 3 times.
What is scary then right now? Like, tell me about a game that has come out in the last 2 years, 3 years, that is, like, scary.
Yeah. I think what we're getting at here is the artifice of our social media life versus real life. You have these people who are diluting everything, who are making everything a joke, right? And then that's the way some people are processing horror, through that lens of, like, let's kind of bury it, let's smooth it out. And then you have the real life.
Oh, this is Letterboxd too. Letterboxd is the same thing, right? There's the people who leave a review on Letterboxd, and it's always, and I've done this too. It's like, what's the 5 words that make it pithy, and I can have it out of the way.
Yep.
And I've reduced this really beautiful experience to, like, 6 cheeky words.
A joke or whatever. Yeah, no, exactly. And it's all like, this is how you're dealing with the uncomfortable, but you're smothering it in artifice. So that's the online world. The real world is extremely terrifying all the time. And I like games that are real about that, that are honest about that, and take it to whatever extreme they feel like they can do. I'm trying to think of a game that scared me in the past few years. That's going to be a tough one. I love, do you know Puppet Combo, that developer?
I don't think so.
Probably my favorite horror developer. Puppet Combo is an indie dev. They have like a publishing imprint called Torture Star. They're crazy. They're just like probably the most inspired by movies out of most publishers, like very obviously making homages to like shitty 80s slashers.
The titles of their games are Stay Out of the House, Christmas Massacre, Murder House. Power
Drill Massacre, like so, perfect. Yeah, just like so evocative. Their games really scare me. They're all super short, they're all super pixely, but they're eerie, and they make me feel the same way horror movies feel, where I'm just like so sucked in by how bad I feel. And that's what I like, and that's what I want to leave with.
Horror is obviously always on trend. It's just a kind of question of which trend. I think in film right now, social horror or horror with a message has been very chic. What are the current trends in gaming horror outside of the multiplayer that we've talked about?
Space. Why space? I don't know, but space. And I think everyone's trying to make Bloodborne again, and no one's done it. But a lot of devs that I talk to, when I ask them about inspiration, they mention Bloodborne, even if their game isn't anything like Bloodborne.
Where do you recommend people actually start for horror? So somebody is coming to you. They're like, I get it. You don't want me to play the most popular games in the world right now, but I do want to enjoy some horror. I want to be scared. I want to be made uncomfortable. Where do you point them?
Genuinely, the Silent Hill 2 remake, because I think that kind of falls right in the middle of like, it looks nice. It looks like it was made recently because it was. It plays on your modern hardware and it's accessible in that way, but it is so faithful to the original, and I feel like it really enhances the original in ways. Like I've seen I've looked at, I've compared dialogue from, because I hated James in the original. He's so annoying, and I know for some people that's part of the appeal of like the kind of wonky old school voice acting. For me, so nasal, but modern James, the way that he speaks, the way that he thinks about things in certain moments that tell you a little bit more about his emotional state. So that remake is, to me, kind of the ideal version of a perfect classic horror game. It's just like prettied up and made a little more accessible. So I'd say there.
And what advice do you have to help someone get the most out of the horror experience? Because we'll talk about this more in the back half. But yes, I know that you like to be scared. There's like an entire other part of therapy almost that you get out of horror. How do you get people to open up to the genre?
Well, when I played Silent Hill for the first time, I played with like 5 friends. Like I played it like a couch co-op game in college because I was a real like scaredy cat in college. And if you're like that, if everything scares you, I think you start there. You start with streamers. I mean, that's how I started. And look at me now, like watch a Let's Play, hang out with some friends, but don't try to minimize it. I think that's the difference, because I would watch like Markiplier Let's Plays or whatever of Outlast, every Outlast game. But then afterwards I'd go on the wiki and then I'd read the lore and I'd go to sleep imagining all these things that I'd read about. So I think allow yourself to be afraid. Play them however you want, but just if you feel uncomfortable, go into that feeling. And that's where the excitement is for me.
Well, let's take a very quick break, and then let's come back, and then let's go into the uncomfortable of it all.
Yay.
Why do you play horror games?
I play horror games because I'm a freak, because I like freaky things. I like being a freak. That's why.
Why are you a freak? Why? How does that happen?
I always felt like horror was my birthright. I was always into scary stuff since I was a child. Even though I'm very easily scared, not anymore since this became my job, but once in my life I was very easily scared. But I was always so into horror and stuff. I think because I have an October birthday. Hocus Pocus, my favorite movie as a kid. My first crush, Casper the Friendly Ghost. So this is like who I am. I also grew up in a very kind of spooky household.
You lived across from a graveyard? Is that true?
I lived in Queens, then I moved to Long Island. Long Island represent, shout out Nassau County. But in Queens, I grew up next to a graveyard. And I was really scared of it because it was right next to my house. And it was always on my mind because I was very... my mom grew up in Soviet Bulgaria, so I'm Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian, but through the filter of the Soviet Union, meaning I always grew up with like very loosey-goosey rules because she just couldn't practice. But my grandma and her mother are traditional and intensely spiritual. My great-grandma was a faith healer. So she was a witch, and my mom always tells me that when I was little, she and my grandma put a spell on me because I was crying too much. And I like telling people that as like an example of my household. So I grew up, the graveyard's next to me. I grew up with the idea of like, I like talked to God all the time when I was a kid and believed in ghosts, still do. Like October birthday, all these things. It's just like kind of the veil is thin in my life.
I get it. This is uncanny. I'm also an October birthday, like late October. Also, first crush Christina Ricci in Casper.
Perfect.
And also grew up Catholic and was certain that God had to talk to me because that's like a core Catholic tenet that if you can't hear him, then you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
Wow, uncanny. There's at least dozens of us. Do you remember the first moment that you enjoyed horror?
Well, I never wanted to go to bed without my mom when I was a kid. I slept in the same bed as my mom or my sister until high school. This goes to me being a scaredy cat.
Wow.
Because I was afraid of ghosts. I was terrified of the dark. I didn't like nighttime until I was an adult. This is like who I'm. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I'm a freak.
Wait, so then what was the horror? There has to be a moment you're like, okay, so I'm no longer sleeping in the same bed. I have decided that I'm going to watch Freddy Krueger. Like, what is it?
Oh, okay. I was going to say I always, like I was always awake, so I would always watch Lifetime movies with my mom, which is maybe part of why I was so scared all the time, because I was like, my stepdad, I don't have a stepdad, but like the structure of Lifetime movies is like, oh my God, my stepdad's going to get my friend pregnant and then his wife is going to kill her and then the baby's going to haunt me. So like I always had stuff like that in my head. First time I got scared was, there's too many times. I have a lot of like formative scary memories. What was your first time you really got scared?
When I was probably 5 or 6, I had just moved into our house in rural Midwest, and it was like kind of a suburb, but on the cusp of the woods. Very Stranger Things. And I had gone over to the house of who would become my best friend, and my parents were like, oh, well, you can just walk over from house to house now. We live next to your friend. How great is that? And it was dark out, and I don't think I had ever done this yet. And there was nobody there watching. And this is 100 feet. And yet I was convinced that there were werewolves in the woods and they were going to sprint up between our yards. So I needed to get from door to door before the werewolves got to me. And I so panicked and running that I sprinted up our cement stairs and I fell and I bashed out my 2 front teeth. And I did not have 2 front teeth for Christmas that year.
Were they ready to fall out, or were you?
It was like another 8 months before they grew in. But yeah, I'm sure I was scared before that, but that was the point. I was a scaredy cat too. I did not get into horror until the pandemic, which we'll talk about later. But hey, it's not about me. It's about you. Do you remember? Was there like a game or a horror movie where you're like, okay, this is, I guess, fiction, where again you're like enjoying it?
I was probably 4 or 5. And I was watching one of those like paranormal caught on camera Discover Channel things with my mom. And they were showing what's known in the business as an FBA, full body apparition. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, I bet they did that with baby powder and special effects, whatever the 5-year-old version of that sentence is. And she was like, yeah, whatever. But I was scared. I was so scared. And I was trying to reason my way out of it. I was trying to joke my way out of it as a 5-year-old. So maybe that. But can I tell you a story really quick?
Of course, please.
Okay, again, I was in the same age, 4 or 5. This is true. And I know it's true. And I asked my mom many times over the years. She was there and she was an adult and she says it was true. I was a little child. I was gifted a slide whistle by one of my pre-K teachers or whatever. And I wanted to practice a magic trick, a very standard magic trick. I was like, I took my slide whistle and I put it in my closet and I shut the door And I was like, when I knock on the door 3 times, the slide whistle will disappear. And I did that. I put it in the closet. I closed the door. I knocked 3 times. And then I opened the door. I swear to God, it was gone. It disappeared. I swear. And I wasn't scared because I was like, yeah, that's the trick. Like, I'm doing magic, obviously. And then I closed the door again. And I was like, okay, now when I knock 3 times again, it'll reappear. And I did that, and it did not come back. And I was really upset, not scared, but I was upset because it was a new slide whistle. I had just gotten it that day, and I was really sad. And I made my mom take the closet apart. It was gone. When we moved from that house, never found it. This is true.
I like that you earlier told me that you were 27, but now I think that you might be 104. You're like, you don't understand, Sonny. I lost my very first slide whistle.
I did.
The war was just to break out. World War II? No, World War I. They didn't even call it World War.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt.
Hey, I cannot knock on this. I am certain I saw a ghost my freshman year of college. I saw 2 FBAs, and I don't want to talk about it. We'll save that for another episode. Because I don't believe in ghosts, and yet I also believe that I saw one.
See, exactly.
Hey.
We got to go into that discomfort.
We have to go into your discomfort first. You are the interview subject. Okay. You have written about obsessive compulsive disorder in relation to horror. I really want to talk about this because I think we have a similar path into horror. How has the genre changed your relationship with your OCD?
Interesting. I've had OCD since, as early as I can remember. Should I give the spiel of like what OCD is for people who don't know? Because it always bothers me when people think it's like cleaning or numbers or whatever, which it can be, but that's not all it is. But textbook definition is obsessive compulsive disorder is repetitive, intrusive, unwanted thoughts followed by a compulsion, which can be any kind of ritualistic behavior that takes away the anxiety from the thoughts. I consider my symptom onset to be like around 10, but some of my earliest memories are kind of OCD related, like when I was again, like 3 or 4. One of my earliest memories ever, I remember being really scared that I was going to be immaculately impregnated by God. And I have this very vivid memory of sitting on my friend's swing set in her backyard, just like going around in circles in my mind of like, am I pregnant? Just the next Jesus in my tummy, because I didn't know what actual pregnancy was. I just knew the story of the Immaculate Conception,
and you just had gas.
Yeah, literally. But I was like, and it made me so scared. And I was like, I'm too young. So I've always kind of had OCD, and for my early life, my main obsession or theme is what we call them in treatment, was religious OCD. So I was very convinced that I would be possessed by the devil. That was the obsession. And that was kind of for 10 plus years, that was like the main thing on my mind. And also, so I didn't sleep alone compulsively. Like, I didn't want to be alone in the dark because I was afraid if I was alone, then I'd be possessed and no one would be around to spray holy water on me or whatever. So I kind of had a tortured relationship with horror because of OCD, where like myself, in my values, I valued horror. I wanted horror, but OCD attacks your values. And my brain is like, if you engage at all, XYZ will happen to you. So, I kind of have become a horror games person, or just a horror person in general. Sometimes I watch up to 4 horror movies a day. I love horror movies, but it's become so much more a part of me One, because I've been through treatment, and two, because of the treatment itself. The gold standard treatment for OCD is exposure and response prevention, which is exposing you to anxiety, triggering thought, and then preventing your compulsion to whatever that thought is. When I started ERP treatment in 2019, one of my first ERP homework activities with my therapist was reading the Satanic Bible and doing things like that. So they kind of feed into each other. Like, I do it for my health in a very legitimate clinical way.
No, I get it. I mean, as I said earlier, I love movies. It is my hobby if games is my work.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get into horror movies. And then going into the pandemic, really right before it, I had a truly crippling anxiety attack for the first time. And, a bunch of shocks before and after. And then the pandemic hit. And I would stay up to watch 2 or 3 movies a night. I mean, I was truly sleeping only a few hours. And at first I was like, well, that's not great. And then similarly, I talked with a therapist and they're like, oh, you are treating yourself. You are going toward the thing and that is helping you process it. And it's true. It's incredible how it really does feel like the one true great escape from my own brain is a great horror movie.
Yeah.
Like Rosemary's Baby, which I say realizing holy moly, talk about the movie that really I can only imagine screwing with your head.
I just went to the Rosemary's Baby apartment yesterday.
Oh my gosh. How was it?
It was pretty. It's a pretty apartment. It's also where John Lennon was shot. A lot of history at the Dakota on the Upper West Side.
You have also written a great deal about the way that horror has for centuries undercut women. And you have this great lengthy essay on the modern video game Shadow of the Damned and its ties to the myths of Persephone and Eurydice. You're shaking your head right now. But the weird thing is, I read this and I hesitate to call the piece a harsh critique of the portrayal of gender so much as it is this conversation with a bad relationship almost. I don't know what to compare it to. What do you find so compelling about gender in horror, and particularly in a game like this when it's regressive?
I think in general, not to speak for my gender, but I do think, women are disproportionately, at the end of violence and so on and so forth. So I think it is a real thing for many women that horror speaks to us in particular, and especially just because it is kind of a specter of every day. Even without real world stats or whatever, when you're a little girl growing up, it's what you're told. Be careful, don't walk at night, carry pepper spray. You want to be on the defense because who's going to come out of the dark? And that's also the way that horror media in general portrays horror is you have the final girl, you have women are the face of horror in many ways. And I feel like I just naturally see myself in it. Growing up with the devil in my brain in what felt like a very real way, Reagan and The Exorcist and so on and so forth, they speak to me. I felt so weird growing up. For a long time, I would take walks at night on my college campus or anywhere, and I'd look into people's windows and I'd think they look so normal. And I knew that I looked normal to people too, but that's not how I felt. I was just always kind of yearned for calm, and the only people that I felt could understand me were horror protagonists. As a woman, women in horror who are in these terrible, even cosmic situations, because that's also how I felt. Why must the devil choose me out of everyone? My problems for a lot of my life because of OCD were fantasies. And I relate to women in fantasy worlds that have these kind of horrible destinies, but still conquer them in some way.
Yeah. What are men in horror then? You can say what you want. I know that I'm doing a little bit of a volleyball set and spike, but you can take the spike. It's okay.
Well, it's interesting that you say this.
Okay.
Because I think horror, more than other types of media, plays with gender, right? So, I mean, reading like Carol J. Clover and her essays on the final girl, her body, himself, right? And a lot of like definitive essays about horror movies are by Julia Kristeva, Powers of Horror, Barbara Creed, The Monstrous Feminine. These like types of critical theory are really informative to where and how I think about horror. If I'm telling someone why I think about horror the way I do, it's because of these Freudian ladies. But just the very nature of penetration in horror, you have to think about it in a Freudian way. You have, Leatherface dressed up like a mother with his big chainsaw. Like he is both the father going out for a hunt and the female figure with his apron on. Like a good villain is both of those things. That the xenomorphs and Alien, they have penetrative devices and they have the ability to bear children, and they impregnate guys in the chest. Like they can do all these things. Like gender in horror is so flexible in that it has to kind of flip traditional gender roles of its victims too. So like women get to be the final girl, they get to be the hero, whereas in real life, not always. But then men, for it to be scary, have to be the opposite of what they usually are. So they're not the protector, they're not, impenetrable. They will be penetrated. And that's scary for, historically male audiences or whatever. So men in horror are the opposite of what they want to be, which is also what's exciting about it.
To wrap things up on this section, I want to read a bit of your own writing back to you. This is a beautiful paragraph about horror not being about thinking, but about feeling, which I think is it's counter to a lot of the thinky horror of the moment. You write, everyone who lives in a haunted house has to surrender eventually. Take Eleanor in The Haunting of Hill House, Carrie in Flowers in the Attic, Jane Eyre, Emily in the Castle Udolpho, all like Hinako demonstrates in Silent Hill F, ultimately allow themselves to become entwined with their supernatural or the unnatural. The benefit of this is, as the heart becomes more fragile, emotions come in deeper, more exhilarating colors. The risk is that the mind may become neglected. Tell me more about the mind becoming neglected. What do you mean by that?
I feel like when I write something, I don't have words in my head. I just have like kind of a feeling that I'm writing toward and like putting the words down that feel closer to that feeling. I mean, I just think the more you let yourself be ruled by instinct, the more you kind of embrace being an outsider, because what your instinct is might not be universal. Like Eleanor in Hill House especially is like who I had in mind when I was writing that, because I really felt like I feel her in my heart. As her whole thing is she has no place in the world until she comes to Hill House, which is both something that terrifies and disgusts her, and horror and romance, it also is something that attracts her, and she becomes a part of it. She has a place in the world and she loses part of herself. So I think, letting yourself kind of get high off your own supply is maybe, to some people, maybe detrimental, or maybe in a very literal sense. Like in the times where I was most ill, like with my chronic illness, which is OCD, that's when I wrote Shadows of the Damned. Like I was in the lowest point of my life ever when I wrote that response to Shadows of the Damned. And I don't know, it's just the tortured artist thing, really, is what I'm talking about. Like the more you kind of let yourself feel what you're feeling, I don't have to feel good all the time. And getting deeper into that maybe does not make you the most palatable or fun person, but it can create interesting art.
No, it's really fascinating because the popular reading of The Haunting of Hill House, for people who've not read it, this woman, she can't even borrow her own car to go to this haunted house, well, to go really find her life. And she winds up at this haunted house. And there is this question of, what is the problem? Is the haunted house the problem, or is it our own mental state that is the problem? But talking to you this whole time, it's interesting how much it's both and that it's not a problem. One last question on this. Is there a boundary for horror? Is there a line where it ceases to be therapeutic?
I don't like things that I think are gross, and I don't mean gross in a literal sense, like, because I love body horror. Like, my favorite romance movie is The Fly, David Cronenberg, my favorite. And I got to tell him that, and he was very happy with me this year, Tribeca. But when something feels mean-spirited, I hate the Terrifier movies. I hate rape revenge, usually. Things that feel like they don't have a point, that are just kind of violence for the sake of violence. I'm not into that at all. And I don't think that they shouldn't exist, but I don't think they're good for society.
Can you tell people where they can read your work, anything and everything you'd like them to see?
You can read me every day on Games Radar Plus. I am there day in and day out. You can read my personal writing and experimental writing on Plant Orb. I had to check really quick. And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Ashley Bardhan, just my name. And I am in the process of releasing a tabletop RPG, solo RPG called Doll Sweat, which is a body horror solo RPG about turning into a doll. So stay tuned.
Fantastic. I will make sure that's all linked in the show notes. A Patreon bonus, 5 horror games to play this holiday. Here is where we split up, friends. Patreon subscribers, Ashley sticks around to share 5 horror games that she recommends you play this holiday season, from ultra creepy stuff for longtime horror heads to fun entry points for the easily scared. Not a subscriber? No worries at all. We still have plenty of show in the news of the week, in which I go deep on a game that has been over a decade in the making and it sure looks like is actually going to come out in mere weeks. So, whether you run into the basement or up into the attic, let's keep this scary movie rolling. Act 3, the news of the week. In 2012, an unknown indie studio named Lunar Software posted a trailer for Routine, a striking sci-fi horror game. Its sterile lunar station in disarray, calling to mind the corporate futurism of the Aliens films. You have floppy disks scattered on tables, a meeting room in disarray, a menacing robot, and then a release date, 2013. This December 4th, after 13 years of delays tied to production challenges, creative redirections, and financial strains, along with development on Unreal Engine 3, Unreal Engine 4, and now Unreal Engine 5, indie gaming's most promising vaporware will defy the odds and be released into the world. And I cannot wait. Beyond the new release date and a splash of footage, I'll be real, I know very little about the current state of Routine. What optimism I do have comes in part from its publisher, Raw Fury, who got involved at some point in the 2020s. Raw Fury is on something of a hot streak with Blueprints, The Seance of Blake Manor, and the overlooked point-and-click thriller Kathy Rain 2 Soothsayer. Nonetheless, I do know a good deal about the history of Routine, and I think you should too, because it is rare for a team to design a game for over a decade and it actually sees the Steam new release page. And if the game is good, its tortured development will become one of 2025's best redemption arcs. Hell, one of the best redemption arcs of the decade. Routine's earliest team members, Aaron Foster and Gemma Hughes, began developing the game around 2011 as both a means of fiddling with game design tools like Unreal Engine and also the very assumptions of video game design. Did games need conflict, interaction? Could a game just be an empty space to explore? In the very first trailer for Routine, we see a design that, at the time, felt unlike anything else, especially in the indie space, where most hit games were in 2D. We had FTL, Hotline Miami, Fez, and the few popular 3D indie games relied on bold art direction over graphical fidelity. Games like Minecraft, Unfinished Swan, The Walking Dead. Routine looked like a AAA game, making full use of the Unreal Engine, the engine that powered most AAA games at that time. It's hard to convey just how different gaming culture was in 2012, so let's consider this. Gone Home, the game that solidified explore a big empty room and uncover a story as a serious game genre, hit Steam in 2013, the year after Lunar Software announced Routine. So a game about exploring a space, not wielding giant guns, was really unusual. But Routine would need more time. At first, progress updates came every few months, then a couple of times a year. Meanwhile, the competition materialized, and an original idea devolved into a common one. In 2014, Sega released a sci-fi horror game that didn't just look like Alien, it was Alien. Alien Isolation captured many of the same vibes as the Routine trailers, but with a budget scale afforded to a major fall release. By 2023, a decade after the original release date, an entire industry had been built around horror games in which players uncover mysterious lore by exploring the nooks and crannies of grim environments while being pursued by robots, aliens, and countless other tormentors that can merely be held at bay but never killed or destroyed. Five Nights at Freddy's alone got so many sequels, became a children's fashion brand, and now an entire film franchise. In the many years between the announcement of Routine in 2012 and its release later this year, the reporter Patrick Klepek followed the game, his own byline serving as a reflection of how much time has passed. Pieces appeared on Giant Bomb, Vice. Now he will be covering the game at his independent publication Remap. In 2018, Patrick contacted Lunar Software for an update. In response, the team wrote, "Thank you for remembering Routine. It honestly means a lot to us considering we have been very quiet for a long time now. We are indeed still working on Routine, but things have been a bit rough on the personal side. The team is good and well though, and we are going very strong. We just need to make sure that the game is at least 99% complete before we do that, as we don't want to miss our release date again." What happened after that is a bit vague. We know that the team felt the strain of time and money, and the project shifted to part-time as they took on other work to stay afloat. But in 2022, with new support from Raw Fury, the team began its final push to finish this game. With the release now within reach, the creators have begun to answer some fan questions, including a short Q&A on their Steam page. And hopefully once the game is out the door, we don't just get to play Routine, but we get the full story of its creation. Because along with being a story about how hard it is to actually make art, it's become a story of video games over the past 15 years. The team at Lunar Software, which now consists of 4 people, will launch Routine this December 4th on PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and Xbox Series S, alongside launch day availability on Xbox Game Pass. And that is the news of the week. We have escaped the haunted house, but, listener, gotta be honest with you, before the calendar turns to 2026, I promise you one more scary episode. Will it arrive like a jump scare, or will the anticipation build like a slow boiling dread? Well, you'll have to listen to find out. Next week, though, the anxiety attack of releasing a game in 2025. I have known the game designer turned studio founder turned game director Joel Burgess for years. In roughly a few weeks, he and his team at Soft Rains will release Act 1 of Ambrosia Sky, their sci-fi immersive sim about cleaning up mass death events. I think that's basically the elevator pitch. It is awesome. I am biased. You see, Joel is a friend, so transparency. This isn't a hard-hitting interview per se. It is, however, an extremely honest, exhaustive conversation about how hard it is to fund and make a game in the 2020s, and what runs through the head of a 20-plus person studio head in the days before a video game release that, depending on its success, will decide that studio's future. Joel was in Los Angeles this week taking a few meetings, and we met up at an outdoor cafe in Koreatown. I set up some mics, and we captured this very surreal moment in a creative's life. I think you'll enjoy it, and I think it's something that you won't see many other places. This degree of honesty and frankness, it's pretty unusual. But for now, I begin my farewell. A reminder, post-game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern, usually earlier. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got the 5 horror games that you should play this season. And also, if you are listening to this right now on the free feed, then that means you could go to Patreon and you could get the latest episode of Video Game Journalism 101. This hour-long, basically college-level lecture is about storytelling, how it works, how you can use it to tell better and more engaging stories, and why storytelling is so fundamental to our lives right now. You don't have to care about journalism or media whatsoever for this one. I think it's useful for pretty much anybody. Plus, on the Patreon, no ads on anything. You can subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. You can subscribe to the newsletter where you can get all of the show notes for free at post.games. Postgames logo by James Barham, theme song by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to this week's guest, Ashley Bardhan. Like the show? Leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or share the show with a friend. That last one, it goes so far into helping to keep this show alive. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.